Hello, 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 and welcome to this episode of Reverse Ambition Podcast. My name is Kelsey Cooper, and thank you for listening. This episode is very special, because as much as people of color strive to be great and be best at what they do, race is still an issue as we try to do that. And this story is about my good friend Lola Odeen, who pretty much left her corporate 9 to 5 job to open up a restaurant with her husband, which was the restaurant was doing extremely well. So they decided to move to another location. And she explains what happens when, based on her race and the perception of what her restaurant is all about, she got involved in the fight of her life for her restaurant, which unfortunately she ended up losing. So as real as it is and as inspiring as this podcast is in terms of taking that leap of faith, we also want to keep it real. You know, there are obstacles out there based on race and other discriminatory issues. But at the end of the day, you know, we have to keep moving on. Please listen. Hope you enjoy. And thanks, Lola. Welcome to another episode of Reverse Ambition, a podcast that focuses on those who follow their passion and their dreams. My name is Kelsey Cooper, aka the Social Broker, and I'm really excited to have today's guest on today. She's been a friend of mine forever, you know, from a little tot. When I was starting doing events, she owned this amazing, beautiful restaurant called Lola's. And I just invited her on for her to share her journey. She is she used to work as Senior Vice President at Chase in the Human Resources Department, and then she transitioned to do her own thing as an entrepreneur. So without further ado, please welcome Miss Lola Gayle Patrick-Odeen. What's up, Lola?
Hey, Precious. How are you?
What's going on, girl? Thank you.
I'm so happy to be here to talk to you, Kelsey.
Well, thank you for being on here. This is my labor of love, and I really want to feature those who follow their heart and their passion, no matter how scary it is. And I know you have an amazing story. So let's get it started. I usually ask my guests to walk me through their journey, starting from where they're from, where they went to school, what they majored in, and so forth.
Okay. I am from the island of Barbados, a tiny island in the Caribbean, 166 square miles.
Mm-hmm.
I went to high school in Barbados, and I left Barbados when I was 19 years old to move to the United States. My mother had left about 5 years prior to that, and so I hadn't seen my mom in all that time.
Mm-hmm.
And so just as I turned 19, we emigrated. She finally got not only her green card, but of course green cards for all of us, and there are 4 siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved to the U.S.
Okay. You were excited, weren't you?
I was very excited because coming from a little island, I think there are a couple of things. One, I think of myself as being very fortunate to have come from an island like Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the gems of the Caribbean. The dollar is strong. The island is beautiful. The island is run by people of color.
Mm-hmm.
Our people of color. My teachers were of color. I have friends of many different races. And so when I came to the U.S., I had a pretty strong identity.
Right. Don't Barbados had one of the high literacy rate too in the Caribbean?
Yes,
like
they
90,
do very
90
high.
90%
Yes, it is. And education is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
their educational system, which is based on the British system for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very smart, a very bright kid. I got here and immediately went to work. At the age of, I first started off in sales,
Mm-hmm.
and was pushed along very quickly. I became an assistant manager in sales, and at
This is
the
at
age
J.P.
of,
Morgan Chase?
no, not yet.
Oh, okay.
I was working in a department store,
Oh, okay.
and then I left. I went back to Barbados for a little bit. I was still, of course, very young. I'm only like at the time about 20 years old, and very much in love with a guy that who was still in Barbados.
Oh.
And yeah, that's why I went back,
Mm-hmm.
much to my mother's chagrin.
Mm-hmm.
And stayed too long in Barbados, came back, went to an agency and got my first job in corporate America in what at the time was called personnel administration for Manufacturers Hanover Trust.
Okay.
And I was a personnel administrator.
All right. So you didn't go to college in the States, or?
I did later on. And so I began my career in corporate and really felt inadequate to a large degree because I didn't have my degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had spent probably about, 4 or 5 years working in corporate America before it really hit me that I really needed to continue my education. And so I was able to go to NYU, and they accepted me because the credits, they gave me a certain amount of credits, also because of the, I had a few.
Basically, you had some credits based on your experience, your education experience in Barbados.
Yes, I did, and credits given also because of my tenure in corporate America at the time.
Okay.
And so I was able to go into NYU as a graduate, almost as if I had graduated from college.
Okay.
So I went into a program, a master's type program at NYU.
Okay, dope.
Yes.
Okay, how was that for you? What did you focus on, home in on, in terms of the program?
HR management.
Okay.
HR management. Yeah.
So now that you have your degree, you're adequate to go and conquer corporate America, huh?
I think I did very, very well at NYU. And so it was one of those things that really help to shore you up, right? To some degree, when you are, to some degree, your insecurities are at play. You're already feeling like you don't really measure up because at the time, all I had was a high school diploma.
Right.
But I did measure up. So that education in Barbados worked very, very, very well for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very proud of that. And so to continue my education as I furthered my career at J.P. Morgan, I was selected to go into the Smith Consortium. Every year, Smith College, they have a program where people who do not have a master's degree but have credits toward a master's are selected based on performance from the companies that they're in to enter another master's type program.
Mm-hmm.
At Smith. You're there for an entire summer, working alongside people at your level or maybe even higher from corporations across the U.S. and some overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Also, of course, and that was something else that really helped to shore me up as well.
All right. So you were a rising star at J.P. Morgan, clearly, with all
Yes, I was.
with your experience and now all this education. How did you fare you know, now that you have all that stuff backing you in terms of moving forward in corporate America?
Well, I spent 21 years. I went from, I'm going back in time now. Manufacturers Hanover merged with Chemical Bank to become Chemical Bank. And then Chemical Bank merged with Chase to become Chase. And years after, Chase merged with JP Morgan to become JP Morgan Chase. And so I was actively engaged in the process of mergers and acquisitions, change management programs, very engaged in processes to help move the organization and its people forward.
Wow.
So I think my education to some degree played a role, but I think to a much lesser degree, actually, than my real on-the-ground experience, and more importantly, when you combine that with the innate abilities that people have, I think then you have something powerful depending on who that person is and how committed they are to the work at hand, how committed they are to really getting things done, how committed they are to excellence. And I was that person. And so when you have a combination of all of these things, then you've got somebody in the world who's looking to do something that's quite powerful, I believe.
Right. So you worked your way up to, to senior partner in human resources.
No, I was a vice president at a senior level.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I ended up. By the time I was ready to leave JP Morgan after 21 years, I was a vice president in the investment bank, supporting a large global business, managing multi-million-dollar budgets, and so on.
Wow.
I did big things.
And you left all this to follow your passion in your heart. What led you to do that?
As you can imagine, as a woman of color working in corporate America, it's not an easy journey. I describe it as oftentimes feeling like you're invited to the party, but you're not really welcome.
On a senior level, vice president level, you felt that way?
Yeah, even at a senior level, because you're sitting at the table, and oftentimes you're the only one person of color at the table. You're constantly reminded of the fact that you are a role model. I was constantly reminded. I'm a creative type. And so I always sort of look to challenge the status quo.
You didn't say play along to get along. You were that disruptor, huh?
Yes. And that's, I think, where being an entrepreneur really matters, because it's more, I think, an entrepreneurial mindset that a person needs to have in order to become an entrepreneur. You go into spaces and you kind of look at the way things are being done, and you're constantly kind of challenging those approaches. You don't think that they're right. Now, I was called naive very often in my career, because anybody who cares passionately about the human equation in financial services, you've got to be naive to care about people. But I do. I always have. I care passionately, and to some degree, the company was able to use my ability in terms of building relationships, creating trust, to advance big projects and big processes in terms of change management. So that really worked very well for my own training. But oftentimes there were senior people who kind of challenged my approach, my way of being, and challenged me. I had peers. There was always some kind of competition going on to some degree. There were people who tried to throw me under several buses that they were willing to drive.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sort of thing happened, but you stay on balance and you continue to prove yourself and you do your job until it gets to the point where it really becomes it's eroding your very spirit. And it's one of the reasons that I made the decision to leave corporate America.
Your spirit was eroded. It was done. You're depleted.
I really was. I mean, there's some really major big things that happened to get me to that point. There was a managing director who I supported, who I believed was a racist. I challenged him. He was a superstar. And so there was real conflict that eventually pushed me to leave.
You felt like you were forced out, or?
No, I wasn't. I actually went to my boss at the time and talked ad nauseum about, what I was feeling. He wanted to create another role for me, but I wanted to leave. And I wanted in order to do that, I asked if I could get my severance. He was unwilling at first, but he came around to seeing the common sense in giving me my severance. And so with severance money, and at the time the severance was, I think you got three weeks of severance for every year that you had been in the company. And I'd been in the company for 21 years.
Wow.
And so that wasn't something I wanted to walk away from. I didn't just want to resign.
Right.
And so they worked. They made it conditional on my staying to see my group through the year-end process, and then they asked me to stay through the first quarter of the following year, which I did. And so net, it was a win. You can call it a win-win situation. They got what they wanted from me, and I got what I wanted from them.
Wow, that's amazing how you were able to negotiate that. Some people are like, I'm done. I'm out. I don't care. Give me what you want to give me. But you said, no, this is what I deserve, and this is what you got.
Exactly. I probably deserved a whole lot more given what I had gone through. But that was a retrospective, right? Later on in life, I was able to look back and say, my goodness, with everything that I knew, if I had, perhaps I would have advised anybody else to go see a lawyer to talk about what was going on.
Right.
Something a very different way and to walk away with much more money. I didn't do that. Sadly.
Right. In retrospect, he should have, but
I should have, but there's something about what happens to you personally. Like, I could give the very best of advice to any employee who would have come to me under similar circumstances. I would have negotiated much more for them. But when it's about you, when you're really not able to pull the cobwebs away completely because what you're feeling is primarily emotional, you're sort of disconnected from what it all means, right? In terms of big picture.
Right.
You're really not that connected in. And I didn't tell a lot of people what was going on. So I was carrying a lot of that burden on my own.
Right.
And I wasn't being the best advocate for myself.
I mean, that happens a lot of us. You give all the best advice to your friends, but when you are in that same situation, your emotions take over and you can't even think straight. So it happens to the best of us.
Yeah, it does, unfortunately. And so I play a much bigger role now for other people. And when I'm coaching or I'm giving advice, I can take all of this collective experience and enable a better pathway for others.
Right.
So that's a good thing.
Right. All right. So you got a nice little, severance. Now that you're free from JP Morgan, what did you do once you're no longer in corporate America?
Well, I was in love with a restaurateur, and so I was spending an incredible amount of time at his restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a natural transition. He really needed my help.
Mm-hmm.
And he really wanted to do something so much bigger with the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And with the HR experience that I had, I was able to go in and help him with a lot of the staffing issues that he had. I started taking on the responsibility for all of the parties, building relationships, managing relationships with some of the difficult relationships that he had with vendors and so on. And so I was able to interject myself in a way that added tremendous value.
Mm-hmm. So you became a restaurateur or became a restaurateur lover, partner? What did you eventually, become in terms of that business?
I call myself more of a social entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
right? My husband was the restaurateur, but I saw other ways to sort of use a social environment to do more, to do big things.
Mm-hmm.
And ultimately, I think that's where I fit in. We were partners. We became partners.
You
I
guys
gave a
became
great.
officially partners and stuff, not just
We
lovers?
yes, we became official. Well, we got married, and officially we were partners in business. And I put a lot of financial resources into the business to enable.
Oh, so you also invested not only your experience but your funds.
Exactly.
Okay. And this is we're talking about Lola's, right? The Lola, the amazing.
About Lola, Lola opened in the 1980s on 22nd Street between 5th and 6th Avenues. And my husband bought that business out of bankruptcy in the early 90s.
Mm-hmm.
And so it had been his business since then.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the restaurant had 2 stars from the New York Times. It was a fine dining environment, but also a really fun environment because there was a huge platform for artists. So there was live music every night in the lounge.
Mm-hmm. What kind of music?
Classic R&B and jazz for the
Oh.
most part. And we started gospel brunches in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you guys started doing brunches in Manhattan before people were doing that?
But Lola was the first restaurant to begin a gospel brunch.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. Now everyone does is brunches. All
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
brunches.
Yeah. It was a big thing, and we grew an international relationship because of the brunches.
Oh wow.
The restaurant was really one of the few high-end places where people of color could go, and feel really welcomed and treated as if they belonged.
Mm.
And I think it was something that my husband really prided himself on. My husband is a Swede. And, so there's this white guy who's running a restaurant where the clientele, it's a very mixed clientele, but a heavy Black influence
Mm-hmm.
within that scene. And because the restaurant itself was a gorgeous space, we were used often in television shows, movies, and the like. A lot of people shot in that place.
Wow.
The Best Man, a lot of the scenes from The Best Man were shot at the restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
And quite a few other movies and television shows were shot there.
Wow. So this is a thriving, amazing restaurant focusing on, you know, R&B music, jazz, on a high-end level with,
Yeah.
with diverse clientele. It was located where? In Chelsea, right?
We were in Chelsea on 22nd between 5th and 6th.
Okay. That was a great location.
It
Um,
was after 20, I think it was a little over 20 something. I can't remember exactly, 20, 21, 22 years of being there. the lease was up, and it was now 2004, and the landlord really felt that he could double the rent.
Wow.
And we fought that for some time. We went on a month-to-month for quite a bit, and then he found another tenant who was going to pay him the amount of rent that he wanted, which was almost close to, it was over $25,000 a month is where he wanted to take the rent.
Mm-hmm.
And we found a location in Soho that was completely underdeveloped, but we loved the location. We thought that it would be an incredible opportunity to be in an arts district because we were so much about the arts. And we really felt that we had found a home in Soho. That ultimately was not going to be the case. It turned out to be a dream that really turned into a nightmare.
Wow. So how did that happen? What happened?
So we signed the lease. We did our due diligence, of course. We went to the community board. We talked to people at the community board. There were people who worked at the community board who had been fans of the restaurant in Chelsea for some time. They were excited that we were going to be there, as were we. It was a complete build out. But we found a landlord who was really willing to work with us, and we signed our lease. We went before the business arm of the community board because, unfortunately, your liquor license isn't transferable from one location to another in New York City. You have to go before a new community board. You have to speak to your concept and all of the other stuff. So we did that. We went to the business arm of the community board, and they voted for us unanimously. So we knew that we would be pretty much a shoo-in. I don't know that there are any instances where the full arm of the full business arm of the community board votes for somebody unanimously, and then they wind up going against them. But that's what happened. And so after the business arm of the community board voted for us, we began the construction project. We of course signed the lease. We began the construction project and started moving forward. We had to go before the full board, of course. But we had a great reputation, never any problems. The business arm of the community board has voted for you. You're good to go. And a couple of days, the chair of the community board told me that there was a woman who lived next door to our establishment, that she may have some problems, but he assured me that if I reached out to have a conversation with a guy by the name of Sean Sweeney, who sat on the community board. I think he was a co-chair at the time. He also was head of a group called the Soho Alliance, which is a special interest group in Soho. That he would engineer a meeting between myself and this woman. And, as soon as she met, he said, as soon as she meets you and she sees your plans and whatever, she's going to be in your place all the time. It'll be fine. So I called Sean Sweeney. He was very welcoming. He told me, "Oh my God, Lola, of course I know Lola. Oh, it would be so wonderful to have you here.
Wow.
Yeah. Don't worry about anything. And, everything's going to be fine. No problem. I'll set up a meeting between you and this woman. Her name is Marie Evans. I'll set up a meeting between the two of you. It's not going to be a problem." 2 days before that meeting was supposed to take place, I get a phone call from Sean Sweeney, and he called to say that he was canceling the meeting. And I said, "Why? What's going on?" And that was when I was alerted to the fact that there was more than one person on this call. And
Mm.
there's a voice, and she says, "That's because we don't want you here."
Wow.
And I said, "Excuse me?"
Oh,
She
so you
said,
didn't
"That's
you
right.
didn't you didn't you didn't know she was on the call.
No, I didn't. He didn't tell me that there was that, it was there was more than one person on the call.
Wow.
Um, so she said, "That's because we don't want you here. If I were you, I would pack my bags and leave. I'm hiring an attorney. He's never lost a case. We don't want you here."
Wow. And this is after you started developing and building out your
Yeah,
restaurant.
yeah, yes. And I said to her, "Excuse me, why am I just hearing this now?" And she said, "Well, the flyers only just your posters only just went up." And so I said to myself, aha. So we had just put up these giant posters in the window of myself and my husband announcing. So for the first time, she's now been able to put a face to the project.
Mm.
She hadn't had a face to the project before.
Right.
So in my mind, I understood what she was talking about. And so I said, "Okay, well, tell your lawyer to look forward to losing his first case." And
Mm-hmm.
she said, "We'll see. What kind of idiot are you anyway, who would put a restaurant?" And I said, "Lady, I really have nothing more to say to you." That was pretty much the end of the.
Wow. I mean, wasn't Sean, what's his name, Sweeney, supposed to like negotiate something where you guys could sit down and have a solo conversation and not
Yeah,
put you in a
yeah,
position, put you in a
that
position
didn't
where
happen.
you guys were going at each other like straight off the bat?
That didn't happen. And
Oh.
so when we went into that morning, the following morning, we would go to the construction site every day. And Soho was littered with flyers. And, as you're driving into Soho, they're kind of catching your eye. I don't know what the flyers say. They're neon green flyers. And so they're up on all the posts, signposts, and the like as you're driving up West Broadway.
Mm-hmm.
And when we turned into the space, the guy who is there, who takes care of the space, he comes running out. He's so upset, and he has a bunch of these flyers in his hand, and he
Mm-hmm.
hands them to me. And the flyers say, "Soho residents, beware. Lola Restaurant is trying to come into our community. If you don't come to the community board meeting to stop them, it will mean that you're in favor of," and it began a list that starts with devaluing your properties, bringing more noise, bringing more crime,
Wow.
bringing more garbage, protect the community. The
Wow.
community was the following day. And at the time, I just sort of laughed it off because I couldn't believe that something like that would take hold.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went to the community board meeting, and the room was packed.
Mm.
And at the time, I did not realize that the room was packed for us. And so I think I was the last person on the agenda. And when I went to take the microphone to talk about to talk about the project, the people in the room stood up and started chanting and drowning me out.
Wow. Was
And
your
they were,
husband was your husband with you?
yes. But I'm the one who is the voice for the restaurant. I'm the spokesperson for the most part, right?
Mm-hmm.
My husband is a quiet man. And they started chanting, "No Lola, no Lola, no," pumping their fist, and they're chanting,
Was
"No
that woman
Lola."
was that woman there?
She was there, yes.
So she orchestrated
And
this.
yeah, she did. I found out afterward that they actually had a group of people walking around the neighborhood, telling people that we were opening up a black hip hop club.
Wow.
Um, that the niggers were going to be out in the street with their pants hanging down. They went to, and it took people some time to tell me this information.
Right.
Because, it was many months later before I began to really create my own relationships with people who had lived in Soho for some time. By the time we had opened up our business, and there was a long road to get in there, that's when people who saw what we were really about, the kind of cuisine that we were creating, the kind of environment and the place that we had created, was the antithesis of anything that they had been told. That's when people would come and tell me what they had been told at that time.
Wow.
Which was that we were opening this Black hip hop club and we were gonna have the niggers in the street, and they used names like they used the N-word and other words to describe my clientele.
Wow.
And so that's why they had this outpouring of people coming out to the community board. So the community
just one woman with her racist perspective, just because she saw a picture of you in a restaurant with your husband, all of a sudden made all these conclusions, create these flyers, and started like poisoning her neighbor's minds about Lola. A spot, of course, like you said, it was like an upscale, R&B, jazz, diverse clientele venue to, this is a nigger with hip hop, all kind of crap. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And it got worse.
Did it?
It got worse.
How?
It got far worse than that. So the community board, because of the outcry from the community, decided not to support us for the liquor license. And so our lawyer advised that we weren't going to walk away from the project because of that. The rest had been in business for so long. We've never had any problems. So we went to the community board in Chelsea. We went to the police department in Chelsea. We got letters from prominent people in society who had been to the restaurant, attesting to the kind of business that we ran. We went to the space every day. I stayed in front of the space. I endeared myself to people in the community. I would approach people directly and tell them what we were going through. I had people sign a petition. I had staff come down and do the same thing, and we collected hundreds and hundreds of signatures. And so we took that information to the State Liquor Authority. And meanwhile, the construction project is ongoing, and the state, new flyers go up in the community just before we go to the SLA. And these new neon green flyers say, tell the community that we are going to the SLA. They were renting a bus.
Wow.
And busing people down to the SLA to protect the community against us.
Wow.
And what Lola wants, she must not have.
Wow.
To protect the community, it listed where the bus was going to be, and that they wanted people to come down to the SLA to speak out against us. So that happened. When we got to the SLA, the room was packed once more. People took the microphone and talked about Soho as if it was Dodge City. There were all these drunks and people having sex in their vestibules, and that a restaurant of this size was going to be the tipping point for Soho, and that they just really could not take another restaurant. They could not.
And this happened in what, 2004?
This is now 2005.
Wow. Were you guys still building out? Were still preparing to open?
Yeah, we were in the middle of the construction project.
Okay.
And the state listened to both sides, and the state granted us the liquor license.
Wow.
They immediately sued the state, accusing them of being arbitrary and capricious, and took the state to the New York Supreme Court.
Wow.
So we then had to hire lawyers and to continue fighting them.
Right.
And that court case went on for 4.5 years. Went from the Supreme Court to the appellate division. We had to go to the appeals court because they found a Supreme Court judge to rule in their favor and to take our liquor license away. We went to the appellate division, appealed the case, and the appellate division ordered that the state liquor authority give us the liquor license. During all of this time, they were causing massive interference with the construction project, with the Department of Buildings. These people were very powerful.
Right. What were they doing?
They were running interference at the Department of Buildings by they had inspectors. At one point, we had inspectors come in. They lost the architectural drawings. Then they told us that they had to rip up the floors that we had just laid to go through all of the pipes and all this other stuff all over again. And we said no. So I then went to the mayor's small business office. I met a woman there by the name of Bernadette Nation. It was Mayor Bloomberg at the time. And Bernadette listened very carefully to everything that I had to say. And she was able to act as a go-between between us and the Department of Buildings. It got to the point where they were causing so much havoc at the Department of Buildings with the project that Bernadette had to be the only person who could make appointments or cancel appointments on our behalf. Because appointments would be made, they would be canceled. All of this stuff that was going on behind the scenes, it, causing interference with the project. And none of these calls that were being made to the DOB were made on behalf of us or contractors who were working with us. It was all coming from the outside.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So she made a decision that she would be the only one that the Department of Buildings could take information from about the project in order for the project to be finished up.
Right.
And so we eventually won again at the appellate division. When I went to pick up the liquor license, they refused to give me the liquor license at the State Liquor Authority.
Why?
They had interfered with the process at the SLA. Now the people at the State Liquor Authority, there were so many people who became involved in this project on their behalf. The Speaker of the House of the New York Assembly, Sheldon Silver, he was
isn't he in jail now or something?
He was, but he was behind the scenes working to enable them. There was a senator also behind the scenes working to enable them. There were council people behind the scenes working to enable them. And so eventually I got to the governor. I was able to have a conversation with the governor at the time. And
Governor who?
It was, oh good Lord, here I go again.
I know it's a while back.
Kelsey, my brain.
Was it the?
He was a black guy.
the blind one. Oh, what's his name? I forgot his name as well, but I know who you're talking about. Go ahead.
Oh my God, this is not good. This is not good. Anyway, as I'm talking, his name will pop right back into my head. And so he and I had an in-depth conversation about what was going on in Soho. And he put an investigator on the project. And that all of this is taking time. We are opened they put a block on the liquor license, stopping us from playing live music, so we couldn't run the concept.
Mm-hmm.
And it was having a huge financial impact on our business.
Mm-hmm.
And this continued on and on and on. They just would not stop.
They were
There were
relentless.
people.
They were relentless. All because of this one woman who had a perception of who you were without even meeting
Yeah,
you. And she
yeah,
just took it and ran with it.
yeah.
Wow. And
And
like
at
you
the
said, and
end,
like you said, Lola had like a pristine in terms of people look at Lola as creme de la creme, great clientele, great music, no issues, you know, all that. But this one woman who did not know you from Adam just
no,
had a preconceived notion of who you were, and then she caused all this hell.
it was so personal. It was so vicious. There were people who would come to do interviews with me about it, and there was always this suspicion of, do you know this woman? Have you ever met this woman before? It was an interesting time back then to see people sort of question whether or not racism was still alive and well.
Mm.
And so I took a firm stance.
Mm-hmm.
Racism was alive and well. Certainly as an HR person in corporate America, I thought it was a very interesting thing, right, that was happening, if I could stand outside of myself and look back at a lot of the stuff that happened in corporate America, things that I knew was happening. I can't tell you how many people I've had to let go from the firm, or how engaged we were in terms of diversity awareness and all of the things that we were doing to change the mindset of people within corporate.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew racism was alive and well.
Right.
I'm fortunate because I'm a sort of multicultural type, so I kind of sit in the middle of these spaces, and I can lend a voice to the struggle in a way that white people will listen.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a unique space to be in. And then going to Soho and having this sort of in-your-face racist attack take place, I wasn't going to run away from the argument. I wasn't going to shy away from it. I wasn't going to pack up and leave just because they said so.
Mm-hmm. So you fought all the way to the end, and you eventually won everything. I mean, your case and everything, but it was costly, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. It was very expensive. And that, my dear, was the plan. The plan, they never intended on winning the case. The plan was to engage us in a legal battle that went on for a prolonged period of time to bankrupt the principals. That was their plan.
And they succeeded.
And they succeeded.
Right. So even though you won all your battles, legal cases, issues with Department of Buildings, you ultimately won every one of them.
Ultimately lost the war, right? We won the battles, but we lost the war ultimately. And so I was, by the time we lost everything.
Okay, so how long did you guys remain open, and how long did all this issue?
We closed the restaurant in 2009, in January of 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
And the reason why you closed it, because you guys were financially just depleted. Doing all this with the various delays, with the legal fees and all that good stuff.
Not being able to run the concept as it was. There are so many restaurants between. I mean, we were a destination restaurant for a reason, right? We had this amazing platform for the artists, the music that we did, our gospel brunches, which was, a huge hit for the restaurant, brought in incredible revenue for us. we couldn't do any of that business any longer.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really had a huge impact on our wherewithal to sort of just keep things going.
Right. So as an entrepreneur, I know you were emotionally caught up in everything based on how this woman came at you. How do you any regrets in terms of how you handle it? Would you have just moved on, to another location, or would you have taken a different approach as an entrepreneur because it costs you so much? Any
It
regrets?
did. I think that in retrospect, there was a lot of growing up that I needed to do. Every fight is not worth fighting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know now if I would have just simply walked away. But there's so many incredible lessons learned as a result of immersing myself in that, and also as a result of suffering great loss.
Mm-hmm.
We fought so passionately for the business. I feel like it was a part of an identity too for my husband and I.
Mm-hmm.
We cared as passionately about that business as we would have a child of ours.
Right.
And so having put so much of ourselves and our resources, we didn't just hire, GMs and managers to run the place. We ran that restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
That takes a lot. Running a restaurant in New York City is one of the toughest businesses in the world to run.
Yeah.
It takes a lot from you. And so we had already, in terms of creation, what we had created, but then the day-to-day management and running of the place, that also takes a toll.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the end of all of it, I look back with this thought, that everything that happens, it happens for a good reason. I've sort of
What did
taken
you take
all
away from that? What happened after, you guys closed? How was the neighborhood? Did they celebrate their
no.
win? Whatever happened to that woman?
um,
Whatever happened to her? Like, is she still
well,
around?
no, an interesting thing would happen. I stopped going to Soho for some time. I just couldn't even go back there. There were years that went by, and I couldn't go there. I was so sad. I was so depressed. I was in the midst of a severe depression.
Mm-hmm.
I'd lost all of my 401k money, all of my retirement money. I'd
Wow.
lost everything.
Wow. All
And
because of this woman who had a racist
yeah,
perception of who you are and who your business was.
yeah, yeah, and all because I dug in,
Mm-hmm.
right?
You
So,
decided to fight.
um, yes, all because I decided to fight for myself. There were a lot of interesting lessons learned as I look back on it.
Mm-hmm.
There were people who really wanted to help.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there were people who came to my defense, but there were also people who had much larger platforms than the people who actually did help, who did absolutely nothing to help.
Mm-hmm.
And people of color who tried to convince me that race had nothing to do with it.
Wow.
It was a very interesting, as I look back on it now, to see how people sort of settle into the status quo of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And now that there's a much bigger conversation going on now about race, that conversation wasn't happening back then. There was no social media,
Right.
right? I think
Right.
Facebook was just getting started. There was no Twitter. There was no Instagram.
And businesses didn't know how to be social, even if they were around. They didn't know how to. They weren't socially savvy, especially since you guys are from the old school. way of doing business to kind of like get on,
Exactly. Exactly.
Instagram and
So
Twitter. Well,
people
Instagram
try.
wasn't around. Twitter may have been around to kind of like voice
I don't
what
think
was
Twitter
going
was
on.
around. I don't know.
I think
I don't know when Twitter
Twitter was
started.
around in '09. Oh, but you guys closed in '09, right?
Yeah, in January of '09.
Right.
And so there were people, again, people who did not enable, who looked on and did absolutely nothing. I remember there was a reporter from, I think she was from the New York Post. She really wanted to do this story. And she sent investigators down. They went through everything. She was the writer, and she had begun to write the story. It was going to be a front page story. And she called me a few weeks into it, and she said, Lola, my editors told me that I'm not supposed to speak to you ever again.
Wow.
We're pulling the investigators off of the case. And I said to her, Rebecca, why? And she said, I don't know why. They're not telling me why. This is how powerful the people who I was fighting, this is how powerful they were.
Mm. And it's funny we have it in this podcast now. A couple of days ago, there was a hearing in terms of why people of color should get reparations in terms of, and this is a good reason why. This is a good example of how we need it. We deserve it. Because
Yeah.
of issues like this. Like, I mean, listen, this woman went about her life, with a little win. She probably got her little neighborhood intact. But she didn't. I mean, even if she didn't realize or she didn't care how much damage she caused to not only to you personally, but to a business that was thriving, that represent the best of our culture.
Yes, the best. Absolutely. I think you said something that's really critically important. Because as I look around, of course, there are so many people out here who are doing amazing things. And I don't care whether your platform is big or small. I believe in humanity, and I believe in the power of people of color. We go through so much. We're made stronger from every difficulty that we've ever had to overcome. And so I'm not going to allow what happened it almost derailed me, but I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm going to sort of take all of the collective wisdom, and now I'm ready to do something that I think is going to be very, very important.
And that's 10 years later, because you closed in 2009. So it took you 10 years to fully recover from everything.
And I don't know that I can say that I'm fully recovered, right? Because there's still some angst there. There's still I carry the pain of this.
Right.
I just have to find the right way to compartmentalize. And
right. Wow. Trauma. You got trauma,
Yeah, to use it to fuel all of the things that I have in front of me.
Right.
And to do something that's really amazing as a result of all of this.
Right. So you still have that entrepreneurial spirit despite all that you went through. For anyone entrepreneur who is going through something like this, who, what would you advise them based off your experience to do? Any advice would you give anyone who was going through the same thing you're going through?
I think it all really begins with who you are as a human being, who you are as a person. With anything that you have to go through in life, it's the foundation on which you stand that is going to be the thing that you're going to rely on to get you through. And if you are not confident, if you are not sure about yourself, if you're not completely and utterly authentic in the space that you are in, and that means being connected in with your soul, with the very essence of who you are and what you're about, if there's any kind of disconnection, then there's going to be a problem because you could fall for anything, right? I think
Mm-hmm.
it's important first to shore yourself up.
Mm.
Um, People, I've done a lot of therapy as a result of having gone through this. I've been in therapy before, and psychology obviously has played a big role in my life, being in an HR role. And so you think that you understand a lot about yourself, but I think to a large degree in my 30s and in my early 40s, I would refer to myself as being authentically inauthentic, believing that I knew something about myself, being so confident in who I was, but it was a mask. I really wasn't that connected in. So it took hitting a brick wall like that to kind of force me to confront myself in a much bigger way, in a much better way. And I think that now I'm at a place of that readiness where I can face whatever comes. I know who I am.
Right. And you're gonna put this all in your future entrepreneurial endeavors.
Exactly.
Well, this is you know, heartwarming,
Did I come back to
story.
yourself?
I'm trying to come up with like a good way to like end this. Because ultimately this podcast is about, people that really dive into their passion and dreams, and you did just that, and you went through hell.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And now I'm creating a much bigger platform that is about that is about transformation, about transformational outcomes. I
mhm,
want to create a social environment to do so much more.
mhm,
Um, it's not just a restaurant that I'm looking to create. I want to be able to combine thought leadership with artistic expression, specifically aimed at transformational outcomes.
mm,
A member model, coalescing a group of like-minded people, all aimed at one thing, and that is all about creating a better world for us and for the next generation. And so
mhm,
that's what I can do. And people are taking this idea of sort of creating something better for all of us, and they're doing that in their own spaces.
mhm,
I can do this because of all of the hardships and the struggle that I've had to overcome. I can take my knowledge of what it takes to create a restaurant space that thrives, a focus on an amazing cuisine and a beautiful space. But for me, it has to be more than just that. And
mm,
so I'm hearkening back to my HR roots to some degree. And again, everything that I now know about what it takes to um, become a truly authentic person in this world, to really be connected in with the people that we are, connected in with your soul, to be on mission, to do the work that you were put on this earth to do. I'm connected in with all of that. I'm sorry
mhm,
that I had to go through such a tough time in life to form all of these connections. But the one thing that I would say to any entrepreneur is get your ego out of the situation and focus more on who you are, why you're here. Um, are you connected in passionately because this is something deep within your soul that resonates? It feels like the thing that you must do, that you're going to lose your breath if you don't do it. Are you doing it because your family wants you to do it? It's time to get ego out of the situation and come to things from a better place of understanding. But it's really just all about that authentic you.
mhm. And then when you become that authentic you become a better entrepreneur, and it's, I would say a
Absolutely,
successful entrepreneur. Well,
absolutely.
well, you're a true disruptor. From corporate America to entrepreneur world to restaurateur world, you don't back down, Lola. Clearly, and I don't think you're
No,
supposed to. And it's people like you who's gonna like open up, doors and pave the way for people coming behind you. So thank you for sharing this amazing story. Though it was a little bit depressing, but you clearly, glass is half full for you, and I'm glad that you're still intact mentally and you're still pressing on.
I am.
With everything.
Kelsey, thank you so much.
Huh?
I said, Kelsey, thank you so very much. It's such a pleasure to speak to you. I've loved you for a long time, and I still do. I remember that young man that you were.
I am.
Yeah, no, but you've grown that, right? Like,
right.
You've become even better, but you were such a sweet and wonderful spirit, and I'm happy to be here with you, to talk to you, and to share this story. Thanks for giving me the time and space to do it.
You're welcome. I'm glad. I'm more than my pleasure to do it. All right, girl. Take care.
I will. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all for listening to today's episode. As you hear, it was very heavy, and it was very heart-wrenching to hear Lola's story as she struggled to follow her dreams and passion. But one thing I got from her, regardless of what happened, she persevered. She just persevered, and pretty much that's what we all have to do. We have to do what we can. We have to do to follow our dreams and passion, no matter what obstacles get in our way. That's beyond our control. We just got to keep going. Period. Just got to keep going. Until next time, I'm the social broker, Kelsey Cooper.